Okay, let's unpack this phenomenal corporate history.
That's a big one.
Today, we are undertaking a thorough examination of a global giant, Nintendo Co., Ltd.
Right.
We're tracing a massive 136-year corporate evolution, moving well beyond the familiar faces of Mario and Link to truly understand the company.
To get to the unexpected origins, the unique business strategies, and, the series of radical pivots that really built this company.
When you look at Nintendo today, this Japanese multinational video game and entertainment powerhouse in Kyoto, it is genuinely difficult to reconcile that image with its origins.
It really is. The scale they operate on now is just staggering.
Absolutely. Our source material gives us some hard numbers to anchor this analysis.
Which you almost have to do to grasp the scale.
As of May 2025, Nintendo consoles have sold over 860 million units worldwide.
860 million.
And that's just the consoles. That's alongside more than 5.9 billion individual games sold.
It's a level of cultural and commercial saturation that, very few companies ever achieve.
And that reach translates directly into financial muscle, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're not just a popular entertainment brand. They're a major financial entity.
They're listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, the TYO.
And they're a key component of both the Topethix Core 30 and the Nikkei 225.
So for those of you who track the markets, what does that actually mean?
It means they're considered one of the largest and most liquid non-financial companies in Japan. Their economic heft is, well, it's undeniable.
Which makes the starting point almost unbelievable.
It does.
Where does a company with that much market presence even begin?
Well, the sources tell us it was established on September 23, 1889.
By a craftsman named Fusajiro Yamauchi in Shimajuku, Kyoto. The original name was Nintendo Koppai.
And their initial product was miles away from electronics.
Not even close.
They specialized in handmade Japanese playing cards known as karuta.
Specifically hanafuda or flower cards.
Right. And this immediately brings us to one of the most enduring, unresolved historical mysteries about the company.
The name itself. We've all heard the common assumption.
That Nintendo means leave luck to heaven.
It's a very romantic explanation, isn't it? It fits so well for a game company.
It does. It's widely assumed, but when you study the actual corporate history, the sources are clear.
It lacks historical validation.
Completely. The reality is that even the founders' descendants, including Hiroshi Yamauchi, who ran the company for decades,
Right.
admitted they did not know the true intended meaning of the name.
So it's a piece of beautiful corporate lore, but one that is likely, entirely fabricated.
Or at least impossible to prove.
What's particularly compelling, and what really hints at that unique corporate DNA of risk-taking, is the context surrounding those early cards.
Yes. The sources paint a picture of an industry with a distinctly criminal association.
We have to remember that in 1882, the Japanese government banned most forms of gambling to control social unrest.
Precisely. But the one exception was hanafuda.
It was still tolerated.
Which made the cards extremely popular, but primarily in, Yakuza-run gaming parlors in Kyoto.
So other card manufacturers, they were probably fearing government crackdowns or just didn't want that association.
Exactly. They chose to exit the market.
But Yamauchi persisted. Right. He didn't avoid the controversy.
No, he embraced the market opportunity, even if it was adjacent to organized crime.
He did. And this is a massive piece of the corporate puzzle.
It really is. Yamauchi was shrewd and persistent in what was a tough, high-risk market.
He focused on becoming the primary producer of hanafuda.
Right, quickly hiring assistants to keep up with the demand from those gaming parlors.
So this willingness to prioritize market control and strategic risk-taking over, says, avoiding controversy.
It established a core trait, a trait that we see repeated throughout the next century of Nintendo's history.
That early success in the criminal-adjacent card market really defined the company's first half-century.
It did, spanning from 1889 right through 1972.
And it's an era characterized less by stability and more by necessary, sometimes desperate pivots.
Absolutely. They achieved this remarkable longevity without the benefit of consistent, high-volume revenue.
The initial market for hanafuda was niche, and Yamauchi's cards were handmade.
Which made production slow and expensive. But there was another subtle, almost perverse challenge.
Which was?
The cards were extremely durable. They lasted a very, very long time.
So high quality was actually bad for the balance sheet.
Exactly. High durability translated directly into a low replacement rate.
So sales were limited to new customers, and repeat business was minimal.
The company needed to generate turnover to survive.
So the business required constant, clever adjustments, bordering on ingenious marketing strategy just to force renewal. What specific tactics did they employ?
Well, they focused on strategies designed to ensure decks were renewed continuously, regardless of where.
Okay.
One key solution was launching a cheaper, lower quality line of cards called Tengu.
And these were designed to wear out faster.
Precisely, thus driving immediate replacement sales. The strategy here was deliberate planned obsolescence, a full century before that term became common in the electronics industry.
That's a fascinating nugget.
And the other tactic involved logistics and distribution.
How so?
They actively encouraged local merchants who supplied the gaming parlors to continuously renew their decks.
And this wasn't just about ensuring fresh cards for the players.
No, it was a way to avoid the suspicion that reusing cards might generate in those highly superstitious and often paranoid gambling parlors.
So it was driving mandatory, rapid repeat business for Nintendo.
They were generating demand by controlling the environment of play itself.
They also saw the potential for a market expansion beyond Japan and beyond that criminal element.
Right, which led to the introduction of their first Western-style card deck, or trump.
Which was around 1902 or 1907, shortly after the Russo-Japanese War.
And this helped them expand even as they faced new levies like the kurudazai, the playing card tax, during this period.
We also need to talk about the unusual system of succession that kept the company under family control for over a century.
Yes, this is very important. Fusajiro Yamauchi didn't have a male heir who wanted the business.
So traditional Japanese culture stipulated that he must adopt his son-in-law,
Sekiryu Kaneda, to maintain family control. Kaneda adopted the Yamauchi surname in 1907 and took over the company in 1929.
By then, Nintendo was the largest playing card business in Japan.
It had survived the shift from the Meiji to the Taishu and early Shuhei eras, but the critical, transformative leadership came from the third generation.
Yes, the lineage continued through Hiroshi Yamauchi, Sekiryu's grandson.
He became the president in 1950, and Hiroshi was the leader who made some key early strategic moves.
Like changing the name to Nintendo Playing Card Co., Ltd. in 1951.
Centralizing manufacturing, and by 1953, becoming the first company to successfully mass-produce plastic playing cards in Japan.
But the most famous early pivot under Hiroshi Yamauchi was that partnership with Walt Disney Productions in 1959.
A huge move. This incorporated Disney characters onto the playing cards, successfully opening the critical children's market.
And it gave the business a massive mainstream boost.
It was hugely successful. By 1961, they established a Tokyo branch and sold over 1.5 million card packs.
All relying heavily on televised advertising campaigns.
They even took the company public. They had finally moved beyond the criminal parlor market and into the family living room.
That said, the source material points to a dramatic downside to that Disney reliance.
The 1964 crisis.
Even after earning a substantial $150 million that year, the dependence on Disney exacerbated a fundamental problem.
Japanese society was shifting rapidly.
This is a crucial point that needs detail. It wasn't just that they shifted to new hobbies.
No, it was the entire economic and social infrastructure changing. After the 1964 Tokyo Olympics, Japan experienced a massive economic boom.
And disposable income rose dramatically.
People started spending money on leisure that required them to leave the house.
Things like pachinko parlors, bowling alleys.
Nightly outings. Playing cards were suddenly perceived as boring, homebound entertainment.
And when Disney card sales inevitably began to fall, Nintendo had no alternative product line to fill the vacuum.
And the market reacted brutally.
Brutally is the right word. After the peak in 1964, Nintendo's stock price plummeted
to its lowest recorded level of 60.
60 yen. This devastating drop signaled an existential threat.
It forced an urgent, non-negotiable need for business transformation, a complete reinvention of what Nintendo was.
And this is the moment they pivot into electronics and R&D.
Setting the stage for everything we know today.
And the catalyst is an assembly line mechanic, Gunpei Yokoi.
Hired in 1965, initially just to maintain the assembly line machines used for manufacturing the playing cards.
It's an almost perfect example of a company facing ruin, making an unstructured, high-risk leap.
Yamauchi immediately increased investment in R&D, establishing a new department in 1969.
And Yokoi moved to this department.
And thanks to his experience tinkering with electronic devices in his spare time, he was put in charge of the games department.
Wait, so Yamauchi, a card company president who had just seen the failure of his Disney strategy,
Yes.
decided to hire an assembly line mechanic and tell him to build a futuristic toy. That sounds wildly unstructured.
It was Pure necessity, combined with Yamauchi's innate sense for novelty.
And the core philosophy Yokoi brought was known later as lateral thinking with withered technology.
Which means using cheap, readily available, mature technology in new, clever ways to create something novel.
He wasn't focused on expensive, state-of-the-art tech.
No, he was focused on affordable, accessible, fun, new ways to play.
And his impact was immediate and phenomenal.
Launching Japan's first electronic toy in 1970, the beam gun.
An optoelectronic pistol that sold over 1 million units.
This established a clear lineage of early electronic hits, all designed by Yokoi.
All demonstrating that unique focus on accessible, novel play mechanics.
We're talking about the Ultra Hand, a toy grappling arm that sold over 1.2 million units in Japan alone.
The Ultra Machine, the Ultra Scope.
And the infamous Love Tester. They were simple, mass-producible, and completely novel compared to boring old playing cards.
And the genius strategy here is how quickly they leveraged this experience for future electronic ventures.
Right. They partnered with Magnavox to provide a light gun controller based on the beam gun design for the Magnavox Odyssey console in 1971.
So that's their first step, long before the Famicom, into the world of home video game consoles.
Exactly. It shows that by the early 70s, they had successfully pivoted their entire business model
From a 19th century craft
to a 20th century electronics innovator, all driven by a devastating financial crisis. As we transition into the period from 1973 to 1987, this era defines Nintendo's journey to global dominance.
But it was a journey of navigating severe financial threats, this time global ones, to emerge as an industry leader.
This transition wasn't smooth either. Immediately following their successful pivot to toys, the company faced external pressures.
Notably, the 1973 oil crisis.
Yes, the source material details that this crisis dramatically increased the cost of plastic.
Which Nintendo was completely reliant on for its electronic toys and new products.
This led to losses of several billion yen. The company was so focused on electronic leisure that they became vulnerable to global commodity price swings.
And the fallout was significant. The subsidiary dedicated to these new electronic products.
Nintendo Leisure System Co., Ltd., had to be closed,
This forced another strategic reorientation, a heavy focus on the arcade business.
which used less plastic and could generate high returns from a single expensive unit.
They released the laser clay shooting system in 1973.
An elaborate light gun game, and Wild Gunman in 1974. Both were successfully exported overseas.
Even during this early video game incubation period, company leader Yamauchi was acutely motivated by the successes of competitors like Atari and Magnavox.
He saw the future. He saw it was in home consoles.
So he moved quickly. Yamauchi acquired the Japanese distribution rights for the Magnavox Odyssey in 1974,
Following this, a major partnership with Mitsubishi Electric was key.
which led to the development of Japan's first microprocessor, specifically for video game systems.
And eventually the Color TV game series, the first system developed and distributed by Nintendo in 1977.
And this is where the next genius arrives.
Shigeru Miyamoto. He joined the company in 1977.
But his initial role was actually quite modest, purely design.
Right, creating the plastic casing for the Color TV game consoles. He was hired as an artist, not a programmer or an engineer.
But Miyamoto immediately brought a distinctive, unique set of inspirations that would influence Nintendo's future intellectual property so heavily. What were his core influences?
Well, the sources highlight a blend of traditional Japanese culture, nature, and global popular media.
His inspirations included the natural environment of Shinobi, regional culture.
American popular culture like westerns and detective fiction, and even folk Shinto practices.
So unlike many of his peers focused on, say, space shooters,
Miyamoto was creating worlds based on stories and environmental context.
these distinct inspirations are why Nintendo's franchises, like Zelda and Mario, feel less like technical achievements and more like cultural landscapes.
Exactly. The stage was set for hardware and talent, but financial stability was still a struggle.
So Nintendo founded Nintendo of America, or NOA, in 1980 in New York City.
Led by Hiroshi Yamauchi's son-in-law, Minoru Arakawa, who hired Yamauchi's daughter, Yoko, as the first employee.
They entered the American arcade market with Sheriff in 1979.
And Radar Scope in 1980.
While Sheriff was Nintendo's first original video game, Radar Scope was the one that nearly sank the company.
It really was. NOA, wagering most of its modest finances, ordered 3,000 Radar Scope cabinets shipped overseas from Japan.
And the game failed spectacularly. in the fickle American market.
It just didn't resonate at all, and here's where it gets really interesting, because logistics magnified the disaster.
It did. The game shipped via a 4-month boat ride.
So by the time the cabinets arrived, Arakawa was facing a financial catastrophe with massive dead stock that nobody wanted.
The sheer panic was palpable, noted in the sources. Arakawa regretted founding the subsidiary.
And his sales associates were literally borrowing life savings just to keep the lights on.
To mitigate the disaster, NOA relocated its headquarters from Manhattan to the Seattle metro area.
And this move was strategic. It removed the frenetic, expensive New York lifestyle and, critically,
it shortened the shipping route from Japan to a mere 9 days.
It directly addressed the weeks or months-long delay that plagued the radar scope situation. They learned a hard, expensive lesson.
That logistical efficiency must be prioritized to succeed in the volatile American market.
But they still had 3,000 worthless arcade cabinets sitting in a warehouse.
A warehouse, by the way, in Tequila, Washington, owned by a landlord named Mario Segal.
Yes, the same Mario Segal who would lend his name to the most famous fictional character in the world.
So Yamochi receiving Arakawa's panicked pleas about the dead stock.
He had no top engineers available to redesign the game, so he took the ultimate risk.
He assigned his young artist assistant, Miyamoto, the case designer with no engineering background,
to redesign the failed radar scope cabinets into a new game, using the existing hardware.
This resulted in Donkey Kong in 1981.
An absolute smash hit. The critical difference being the introduction of the very first platform games.
It was a completely novel form of interaction.
The source material emphasizes the financial lifeline this provided. This single game generated a massive $280 million in profit for NOA.
Between 1981 and 1983 alone, it turned the company's fortunes instantly from insolvency to market leader.
Arakawa used those profits to buy land in Redmond, Washington, where NOA remains today.
And to fund the launch of the next major hardware initiative, the home console.
This success also led Nintendo to leave the Japanese arcade market in late 1985, signaling a full strategic shift to the home consumer space.
The ultimate goal was the launch of the Famicom, released in Japan in 1983.
It quickly overtook its domestic competition, Sega's SG-1000. But the American launch in 1985 was complicated by what had happened globally just 2 years prior.
The infamous 1983 video game crash.
We can't overstate the context here. The U.S. market had collapsed.
Due to oversaturation, fueled by a proliferation of low-quality shovelware games from numerous third-party developers, many of whom were unlicensed.
Industry revenues collapsed from over $3 billion down to a negligible $100 million between 1983 and 1985.
The public had lost all confidence in video games as a medium.
So Nintendo understood they couldn't just launch a video game console. They rebranded the Famicom for the U.S. as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES.
And marketed specifically as an entertainment system.
With cartridges called game packs that were designed to look like VCR tapes, appealing to the general electronics consumer.
But the true strategic move here was quality control.
Designed explicitly to prevent a repeat of the 1983 crash, Nintendo implemented strict licensing rules enforced by a physical and technological defense.
The lockout chip.
This is a crucial technical nugget. The lockout chip was not just for quality, it was a technological barrier.
It required specific code validation to run the game,
which prevented unauthorized developers from flooding the market with low-quality content. Key rules included restricting third-party developers to just 5 games per year.
And requiring Nintendo's strict validation before distribution.
This level of control reshaped the entire industry structure.
This era also established the official Nintendo seal of quality,
which was a visible mechanism to guarantee authenticity and serve as a form of copyright infringement protection.
This era didn't just sell hardware. It fundamentally ensured the survival of the video game industry in the United States by restoring public trust through enforced quality.
And the scale of this success is immense. Production of the Famicom NES line lasted for decades. The NES until 1995 and the Famicom until 2003.
With approximately 62 million consoles sold globally.
They had successfully navigated 2 major financial threats and cemented themselves as an industry power.
The period from 1988 to 2003 was defined by Nintendo's consolidation of its dominance, particularly in the handheld market.
But also by intense internal debate over game content and, eventually, the end of the founding family's leadership.
In 1988, Gunpei Yokoi's R&D1 team conceived of the Game Boy, launching in 1989.
And this device perfectly encapsulated Yokoi's withered technology philosophy,
It was simple, monochromatic, and used standard batteries.
prioritizing accessibility and longevity over cutting-edge graphics.
And it was an immediate, massive success.
Its initial inventory of 300,000 units sold out quickly in Japan. But the international success was driven by a masterstroke.
Bundling it with Tetris in North America.
That bundled game, with its simple, addictive puzzle mechanics, transcended traditional demographics.
It sold the Game Boy to adults and non-gamers alike.
Over the life of the Game Boy and its successor, the Game Boy Color, over 118.6 million units were sold worldwide,
Making it one of the most successful systems in history and solidifying Nintendo's handheld supremacy.
In the home console space, though, they faced stiff competition in the late 80s from the 16-bit systems.
Specifically, Sega's Genesis.
Nintendo's response was the Super Famicom, launched in 1990, and then the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, in the US in 1991.
The SNES was also a huge hit, selling over 46 million units globally.
But this era was marked by more than just sales. It was about technological leaps. A key example is the release of Star Fox in 1993.
And this is where we need to examine the technical impact. Star Fox achieved an industry milestone by using the Super FX chip. Why was that so revolutionary for a 16-bit console?
Because 16-bit consoles were fundamentally not designed to handle complex three-dimensional geometry.
Okay.
The Super FX chip was essentially a coprocessor built directly into the game cartridge itself.
So it offloaded complex 3D rendering calculations from the console's main CPU.
Exactly, allowing developers to render polygons and create true 3D environments, something previously only possible on much more powerful, dedicated systems.
It pushed the boundaries of what consumers expected from their consoles.
But innovation also brought risks, and we must discuss the Virtual Boy failure in 1995.
This system, designed by Yokoi, featured stereoscopic graphics and was meant to be the next big leap.
It was a catastrophic failure, both commercially and physically.
Critics reported headaches and neck strain from the system's fixed gaze requirement.
And the device simply sold poorly and was quickly and quietly discontinued.
This failure was so profound, it led directly to Gunpei Yokoi,
The pioneer of R&D and the man responsible for the beam gun and Game Boy.
formally retiring from Nintendo. It was a brutal end for a defining figure.
As the console wars heated up, so did public controversy over game content.
Which leads us to the critical era of content scrutiny and regulatory change in the early 1990s.
For many years, Nintendo of America had highly restrictive, moralistic content policies for its games.
They enforced a strict code that was almost Victorian.
Absolutely no nudity, sexuality, profanity, blood, graphic or domestic violence, drugs, political messages, or religious symbols.
Though they made exceptions for widely unpracticed religions like the Greek pantheon.
Which were viewed as historical rather than immediate controversy.
This led to the famous case surrounding Mortal Kombat in 1993.
The sources detail that Nintendo required the publisher, Acclaim, to significantly tone down the gore in the SNES version.
Most notably, replacing the vibrant red blood with innocuous white sweat.
Right. Contrast that with the Sega Genesis version, which was far less censored.
And what's fascinating is the undeniable financial result.
The less censored Genesis version saw more than double the unit sales of the Nintendo version.
That clear market rejection showed Nintendo that their overly strict censorship was actively hurting their business and driving players toward competitors.
The controversy over graphic violence, especially the Mortal Kombat case, was significant enough that it drew the attention of the U.S. Congress.
And this public and political pressure led directly to the formation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, or ESRB, in 1994.
An initiative in which Nintendo collaborated to create self-regulation.
This marked the true policy shift.
Nintendo effectively dropped most of its granular censorship policies. They realized an external unified rating system was preferable to individual corporate moralizing.
They opted instead for a single, broad rule, which remains in place today.
No ESRB AO-rated games would be licensed on their consoles in North America. This standard practice is now shared by competitors like Sony and Microsoft.
And that shift opened the door for numerous mature titles later on.
Resident Evil, Perfect Dark, and Doom games that would have been completely unthinkable under the 1980s policy.
While wrestling with content debates, they simultaneously launched into the 64-bit generation with the Nintendo 64 in 1996.
It was distinctive because it stuck with cartridges,
which differentiated it from rivals like the PlayStation and Sega Saturn that were moving to CD-ROMs.
The argument was faster load times and better security for developers, but it also made the games much more expensive to manufacture.
Pushing development costs up.
They developed the console in a strategic alliance with Silicon Graphics. By the end of its production in 2002, around 33 million units were sold.
It was an iconic console, but the cartridge decision had cost them significant market share to the CD-ROM-based competition.
Signaling a need for a change in strategy.
Finally, the era closes with major hardware and corporate change.
In 2001, we saw the launch of the handheld Game Boy Advance.
A rapid seller with 500,000 units sold in its first week in North America.
That same year, the GameCube launched with differentiating features like a 128-bit Gecko processor and the use of the proprietary mini DVD format.
But the GameCube was technically impressive. It struggled fiercely against its rivals in the market.
Ultimately selling only 21.7 million units. This relative failure, combined with the market dominance of Sony, contributed to Nintendo posting a first-half fiscal year loss in 2003.
The very first time since the company went public in 1962.
And this challenging context marked the formal end of an era. Hiroshi Yamauchi resigned as president in 2002.
He was succeeded by Satoru Iwata.
And this appointment officially ended the Yamauchi family succession practice that had been in place since Fusajiro Yamauchi founded the company in 1889. So the stage is set for the modern era, 2004 to the present.
Which is defined by radical business strategy, a return to the roots of risk-taking, and massive multimedia expansion.
And the GameCube's relative failure plus that 2003 corporate loss acted as a major catalyst for this change.
The motivation was clear. Avoid direct competition in the specs war.
Nintendo consciously adopted the Blue Ocean strategy,
A strategic philosophy focusing on developing new, uncontested market space, rather than competing directly against the established bloody red ocean of competition.
In hardware, this meant creating reduced performance consoles targeting non-traditional gamers.
Effectively avoiding the high-stakes graphics war with Sony and Microsoft.
They were no longer trying to outmuscle the competition, they were trying to redefine the audience.
It was a calculated risk.
That paid off strategically.
The first revolutionary result of this strategy was the Nintendo DS, released in 2004.
Its innovations, dual screens, one of which was a touch screen, and wireless connectivity were central to its appeal.
Driving engagement outside of the typical teen male gamer demographic.
The sheer success speaks for itself, with over 154 million units sold.
The DS became the second best-selling console in history, behind only the PlayStation 2 for a long time.
It proved the Blue Ocean strategy works on a monumental scale.
They doubled down on this accessibility model with the Wii in 2006.
Right, they targeted an even broader demographic, specifically the non-consumer sector, grandparents, casual players, fitness enthusiasts.
And they backed it with a $200 million advertising campaign focused on families.
The innovation here centered entirely on motion control.
Through the Wii Remote, Nunchuck, and later the Wii Motion Plus expansion.
By 2016, over 101 million Wii consoles had been sold worldwide. They achieved the distinction of having the most successful home console of that generation.
A remarkable strategic victory they hadn't achieved since the SNES in the 1990s.
That said, the critics at the time pointed out that they sacrificed graphical fidelity and high-end consumer loyalty for that accessibility.
Were they worried they alienated their core fan base?
That's the core tension of the Blue Ocean strategy. Yes, they temporarily alienated some core gamers who demanded high-definition graphics.
But the trade-off was opening a market sector that was exponentially larger than the hardcore gamer segment.
They generated massive profits and brought millions of new players into the fold. It was a short-term sacrifice of prestige for long-term commercial dominance.
But the pendulum swung again. In 2012, they released the Wii U,
which was meant to follow the Wii's success, but ultimately became a major financial failure.
Selling only 13.5 million units worldwide, it holds the record as Nintendo's least successful video game console in history.
And the financial consequences of this failure, combined with broader industry trends toward mobile gaming, forced yet another major pivot.
The mobile shift.
In 2015, Nintendo formalized crucial agreements with DNA for smart device application development and Universal Parks and Resorts for physical entertainment spaces.
This quickly bore fruit, following the release of mobile apps like Miitomo and Super Mario Run.
The sources highlight the astonishing success of Pokémon Go, developed by Niantic.
That game, which leveraged Nintendo's established IP in a brand new, mobile format, generated $115 million in direct revenue for Nintendo.
And the hardware innovation continued, synthesizing all those past lessons, the portability of the DS, the accessibility of the Wii.
And the modularity that the Wii U tried to achieve.
That synthesis was the Switch, released in 2017.
The Switch solved the great dilemma: how to have a single development path for both home and handheld experiences.
It combined the lessons learned into a hybrid design that functions seamlessly as both a home console and a portable system.
And its Joy-Con controllers featured key innovations like accelerometers and gyroscopes, allowing for simple, accessible games again.
The Switch has been a generational success. As of December 2024, it had shipped over 150 million units worldwide,
Making it Nintendo's most successful home console to date, surpassing the Wii.
and establishing it as the third best-selling console of all time globally.
And this success has fueled a major corporate expansion into media outside of gaming.
A direction reinforced under President Shintaro Furukawa, who took over in 2018.
The stated goal is that this media expansion is necessary to keep the core video game business thriving and growing by reaching non-gamers and reinforcing the brand globally.
We see this most clearly in the physical expansion. The Super Nintendo World theme parks opened at Universal Studios Japan in 2021 and Hollywood in 2023.
These aren't just licensed rides. They are highly immersive, interactive experiences that directly translate their gameplay mechanics into a physical space.
And the success in film cannot be overstated. Nintendo co-produced the Super Mario Bros. Movie in 2023.
Alongside Universal and Illumination, it grossed over $1.3 billion worldwide, setting box office records for both an animated film and one based on a video game.
And Illumination CEO Chris Meledandri was subsequently invited to join Nintendo's board of directors, signaling a deep, ongoing commitment to cinematic production.
The expansion continues with internal resources, too.
Nintendo acquired Dynamo Pictures in 2022, renaming it Nintendo Pictures, specifically to focus on creating internal CG animated projects.
Suggesting they want to control more of their IP's creative output outside of games.
And recent corporate maneuvers show continued strategic growth aimed at infrastructure support. They acquired Shiver Entertainment in 2024.
Specialists importing AAA games to strengthen their development structure.
They also gained full ownership of Monolith Soft in 2024, the studio behind Xenoblade Chronicles and a key development supporter for The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom.
And they have also announced plans to acquire Bandai Namco Studios Singapore in 2025.
All of this culminated in the newest hardware iteration. The Nintendo Switch 2 was released on June 5, 2025.
Featuring a larger display, updated graphics supporting 4K resolution when docked, and 1080p handheld.
And it quickly became the fastest-selling console in history, overtaking the PlayStation 2 record, showing that their combination of core IP strength and hybrid design continues to captivate the market.
The history we've traced is one of constant, sometimes desperate, reinvention.
But none of it, not the pivot to toys, the recovery from radar scope, or the blue ocean strategy, would be possible without a core, deeply unique element of Nintendo's corporate strategy.
It's financial policy.
This is a profound difference between Nintendo and its American or even other Japanese counterparts.
What's fascinating here is the policy set in place by Hiroshi Yamauchi of maintaining a huge cash reserve.
As of September 2025, that cash reserve is estimated to be $1.5 trillion.
Which amounts to around 120% of the company's annual sales.
Why is this strategy so different from contemporary giants like Apple or Google, who often use surplus cash for immediate investments, high dividends, or large stock buybacks?
And why is this huge cash buffer so crucial to Nintendo's long-term identity?
It's the mechanism that allows the company to take those extreme risks we've discussed and to recover quickly from spectacular failures.
Most publicly traded companies are driven by quarterly returns,
which makes it hard to commit to years-long, risky projects. Nintendo's cash policy provides the financial assurance necessary to fund long-term innovation.
even after major setbacks like the GameCube and the catastrophic Wii U performance.
It's not a sign of financial stagnation. It's a resilience fund that enables radical pivots. It allows them to think in decades, not quarters.
Looking at their global organization, we see the structure built around innovation and logistics.
Their core R&D is divided into three main Japanese divisions. EPD, which stands for Entertainment Planning and Development.
And that handles all software development, boasting the largest staff concentration.
Then there is PTD, the Platform Technology Development Division, which focuses on the hardware, the operating system, and the tools developers use.
And finally, NBD, or Nintendo Business Development,
which oversees business strategy and the crucial smart device, ARM their mobile interests.
This separation ensures that hardware, software, and future strategy are all developed in parallel but independently.
And we circle back to the history of Nintendo of America, or NOA. We mentioned the move from Manhattan to Seattle.
But the full logistical rationale is a great illustration of logistics driving fundamental business strategy.
The relocation to Redmond, Washington, specifically shortened the shipping route from Japan.
Directly resolving the shipping delays that contributed to the radar scope disaster.
This decision demonstrates that Nintendo views supply chain and distribution efficiency as critical R&D components.
You can't have successful hardware if you can't get it to the consumer quickly and reliably.
Their globalization strategy includes Nintendo of Europe, NOE, and Nintendo Australia, NAL, but also relies on unique, long-term, non-Nintendo distributors.
Like Bergsala, a third-party company in Sweden that has exclusively handled Nordic operations since 1981.
This willingness to partner long-term rather than demand full corporate ownership is another unique structural element.
A final, fascinating corporate strategy involves their approach to intellectual property integrity.
During their peak dominance in the 1990s, the Nintendo name was being widely used generically to refer to any video game console.
Regardless of the manufacturer, whether it was a Sega or an Atari.
And for the listener, this is what's known as genericide, the risk of losing trademark protection.
If a company name becomes synonymous with the entire product category like aspirin or escalator, the company can lose legal control over the name itself.
That would have been an extinction level of me for Nintendo's brand.
Absolutely. But Nintendo fought this successfully.
They actively engaged in campaigns and legal action to prevent the loss of their trademark, instead of letting their name become a generic descriptor.
They successfully pushed for the adoption of the term game console or video game system.
This sustained, successful effort preserved the integrity and immense value of the Nintendo trademark.
Ultimately, their legacy rests on a few core contributions, starting with that revival after the 1983 crash.
They are widely credited with ensuring the survival and revitalization of the video game industry by enforcing quality standards with the NES.
They redefined game interaction with innovations like the Wii Remote and the Switch hybrid system,
prioritizing new ways to play over graphical fidelity. Critically, they prioritize content quality and title sales, building franchises that are fundamentally timeless over merely selling hardware volume.
And the characters themselves are cultural icons, transcending their original medium.
Mario transitioned long ago from a corporate mascot to a cultural icon and is cited as the biggest single property in electronic gaming.
The sources also cite the massive cultural impact of other major franchises like The Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, Metroid, and Kirby.
And this cultural footprint is now expanding into physical retail as well.
Nintendo is moving beyond third-party resellers and expanding dedicated self-managed stores globally,
including established locations in New York and Tokyo, and newer additions in Osaka, Kyoto, and San Francisco. This move ensures full control over the consumer experience and brand presentation.
So if we synthesize everything we've traced, Nintendo's history is essentially a blueprint of corporate resilience.
It's a story defined by extreme, calculated risk and radical reinvention.
Moving from paper cards supported by Yakuza parlors
to
fighting near corporate insolvency with a cartoon gorilla and a plumber.
It demonstrates a core willingness to abandon conventional market wisdom, pivoting from hardware power wars, the N64 era, to accessibility in the Wii era.
And using that immense financial buffer, that $1.5 trillion reserve, to survive failures like the Wii U.
And ultimately drive future innovation like the Switch.
It's a powerful narrative of adaptability, proving that successful market leadership isn't always about winning the specs war,
but about consistently defining a new category of play.
Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider, based on everything we've just explored.
Given Nintendo's tendency to disrupt conventional gaming markets through its Blue Ocean strategy and its current massive expansion into film and theme parks,
all enabled by that unique corporate resilience and financial cushion, what area of non-gaming entertainment is most ripe for a sudden, unexpected innovation driven by Nintendo's unique focus on accessible play and iconic characters?
Think beyond the theme parks and movies. Where will Nintendo's unique creative vision and that deep cash reserve take them next to define an entirely new category of leisure?
We'll let you wrestle with that one.
Thanks for listening.